All right, let's talk about whether or not you should form a legal entity as a freelancer. Hi guys, thank you so much for joining me today, and good morning. I've been up extremely early and had to go get an MRI because I'm having all kinds of issues on my right side. For anyone out there that's ever had any lower back or nerve pain in their leg, I really sympathize with you. It is not a lot of fun. So today I want to talk to you about the idea of whether or not you should incorporate as a legal entity for your business if you are a freelancer, or I'm going to interchange that term in today's video, freelancer, sole proprietor, just one individual operating in your business. Now, the discussion is totally different if you are a startup, particularly if you are a startup looking to raise investor funding. You are going to want to form a legal entity. Again, even if you are one individual. But today I'm talking about the idea of forming a legal entity, a business, a separate business with a separate business tax ID if you are an individual operator. And the question actually comes from my good friend Jay. So Jay, thanks a lot. Now, as a sole proprietor, particularly a freelancer, if you are side hustling and you don't anticipate your business ramping up to a very substantial amount of income, in most instances, it makes sense. I should go ahead and stop right here. What I should really talk to you about first is the idea that before you make this decision, you need to talk to two professionals besides watching this video. You need to talk to an attorney and your accountant. And the reason you need to talk to those folks is an attorney will help guide you on which legal entity structure makes the most sense if you decide to incorporate. And your accountant obviously will help you from a tax perspective to make sure that the structure that you choose makes sense with your personal tax situation. All right, so back to the idea of, as a sole proprietor, should you incorporate into a business? Generally speaking, I like to see a business producing what I call substantial income before you decide to incorporate. And I'm actually coming at you with this opinion based on my own experience. Now, I have multiple business models, and one of those has a legal entity that I've formed, and that business is largely just me. And what's happening is, in that business, keeping up with the administrative costs of that legal entity are becoming pretty substantial and eating into my revenue. And so I've even been discussing with my accountant the idea of switching up how I have that entity structured. Now, legal entities provide you some individual protections, which is one reason a lot of people look at forming a legal entity, even if they are an individual operator. They provide you some liability protection. If you are sued for a variety of reasons, the business tends to have to be sued first. But keep in mind, if you're the only individual in that business, then the person suing is most likely going to sue the business and you. So it does provide you some liability protection. But the problem I see with, if you just have a side hustle, if you're a freelancer, maybe you're making a few $100s per month, maybe even you're making a few $1,000s a month, unless you get to around that 30 to 50 and above $1,000 range in income, you're going to have some expenses with that business that could be eating into your profit that you may not need. So an example is, when you form a legal entity, you have to have an accountant do your annual tax return. Well, you don't have to have an accountant, but I recommend it because I don't like to have the IRS after me. So I highly recommend it. With that, you're going to have a decent expense. You know, that can range from a few $100s all the way up to, depending on how complex your business model is, a few $1,000s. And so that's eating into your revenue. That's expenses. You could have where you pay someone to process your payroll. I'm a sole proprietor in one of my businesses, and I actually outsource that to my accountant because, again, I don't want the IRS after me, and I don't want to have to deal with that. I'm busy producing revenue, so I ask my accountant to do my payroll for me. Well, they do a great job, and I appreciate that, but that's an expense I have that I wouldn't necessarily have to have as a sole proprietor. So there are all these administrative expenses that come with the business. You may have to file for a business license in your state or your municipality, your county. And so now you've got another expense. I'm not saying as a sole proprietor you won't have some of these, but as a sole proprietor, when you are allowing your income to come through your Schedule C on your personal tax return, and this is not an accounting lesson, but that's the way it flows, is on your personal tax return, you'll see something called a Schedule C. It's actually line 12 on the front page, and that income flows through on your personal tax return. So you may have some of these expenses, but you're not going to have as many. And I know that for certain. So one of the things to think about is how much income am I really going to have as a sole proprietor, as a freelancer? If it's not going to be pretty substantial, then I recommend staying a sole proprietor for a period of time until that revenue hits a larger amount, and then discussing the idea of incorporating with an accountant, with an attorney. The other reason I suggest that is sometimes people just freelance for a while and then they stop. You may have a year where you get busy. Maybe you go back to get your MBA and you get so busy that you can't do any freelancing. And so you just don't have that income anymore. Well, if you had a legal entity, you'd be paying to keep that legal entity up during that whole period. So there's all kinds of factors that go into it. At the end of the day, what I want you to take away from this is, as an individual, as a sole proprietor, think about the idea of whether or not it makes sense to incorporate before you do it. A lot of people rush into business decisions. It may feel sexy to create the name of the business and decide to run off to get it incorporated. Maybe you go to LegalZoom and you spend a few $100 to get that done. Think about the idea of staying a sole proprietorship, allowing that income to flow in your Schedule C. That'll keep your costs down while you get your business model dialed in, and you'll be able to bring in more income to your pocket. I hope that helps. Have a great day.